You are listening to audio from the Decidedly podcast. This episode is a highlight clip from this week's full episode. To listen in on the complete conversation, see the show notes for the link to the complete show. You can help us out by leaving us a 5-star review wherever you listen to podcasts. We appreciate every bit of your support. I'm Morgan McKittrick, your producer, and this is Decidedly.
What would you say would be your one decision tip for business owners and leaders? I'm going to ask you the same question I ask.
Yeah.
that I ask every guest on the show.
Run your family like you run your business. And I give that advice assuming that you run your business well. Because if you run your business poorly, running your family like a business is probably worse than what you're already doing. But almost everything that works as far as advice for how to run a business well, it also works for how to run a family well. So like growing up in your house, we had family principles. We had the Smith family principles, and they were in our rooms.
Yeah.
We had them
written down in
in our bedrooms.
Yeah.
Right. Which is the same way you would do it in a company. You'd put it on the desk.
Yeah.
Right. And say, within these walls, we act this way. And we did that as a family, and that seemed normal to me, but I realized hardly anyone does that.
It's so funny. I remember when we went through that exercise as a family and developed those values. And so your mom and I...
And that's, I'm going to stop you. Yeah. That's actually an amazing point, because that's what you should do in your business, right? Is to decide upon those values with the team, not... as the CEO go, guys, these are the values that I've decided.
These are my values that we're going to follow. Yeah. It was so funny because your mom and I were lobbying for obey your parents as one of those values, and it didn't make the cut because none of y'all thought that was important.
Yeah, that's BS.
You're like, I don't want to be hamstrung by that. It didn't make the cut. I was so disappointed.
No, you got outvoted on that one.
Oh yeah, it was not even.
But
not
wasn't
even close.
I mean, that is my favorite example that I didn't even realize. I mean, well into adulthood, that how smart and wise that was, and that is exactly how you would run a business well. Is not only should you have values, but they should be precise. Not only should they be precise, but you should create them collaboratively with your team. Okay, same in the family. If you go and tell your kids, these are the values. Integrity is important in this household. Mm-hmm. They don't even know what that means. Your 6-year-old doesn't even know what that means.
Right.
So spell it out for them and talk with them. Let them feel like they picked it. Yeah. And then they're way more likely to live by it. And then not only that, but make sure you remind yourselves of them. Recite it. Not just so your employees know it, but so you, the leader, know it. Post it on the walls so you can't escape it. Talk about it to the point that it is exhausting to talk about, and everyone's rolling their eyes. Oh yeah, the family values.
That's interesting. I remember there was an initiative we were putting together in my business several years ago, and we thought it was fairly simple. And so I had my assistant announce it, and then I noticed that people were doing it wrong. I said, just announce that.
How simple was it?
It was a code, single letter codes following a meeting to indicate who was in the meeting and who was taking the lead.
That sounds very simple.
It was simple.
It should just be like initials.
Yes. So if you were leading the meeting, it would say SS, and Bob was going to be with you. It'd say SSWB.
Okay.
Sanger with Bob, meaning you were going to lead the meeting. All right. So it was a code based on initials on who was lead and who was follow in these meetings. I said, just announce that. It's pretty simple, and just have people start putting it in. And then it wasn't happening. And so she announced it again. And then it started to happen, but it was happening wrong. Right. And I said, just announce it again. And so she announced it again. And it was still happening wrong, and it still wasn't happening with 100% success. And I said, let's just keep announcing it. And we're going to announce it every time we find a mistake. We're going to go through this whole presentation again.
Yeah.
And it got to be a joke because we had to do it probably a dozen times. It was super simple. But my assessment of how easily people were going to pick up my thoughts and not only understand my thoughts, my idea, but take action the way that I wanted them to act on these thoughts, I had totally misjudged how that was going to go. And so it is so true that when you're looking at guiding a family or having something that's going to make a change, have it in front of you. It's got to be repeated. You're going to have to go through and do it again. My guess is that you write those values down for people and talk about them every meeting. People have to be able to recite them because you have to be able to recall something if you're wanting it to make a difference in your life and your decisions.
In order for any decision that you make in step one of the decision lab, decide who you are. In order for anything there to matter and make a difference in your life, it has to live in your mind and your heart and your soul. It has to be something that you memorize. Mm-hmm. And not only memorize, live, breathe, embody. If it's not that, then it necessarily cannot guide your daily action. It cannot guide your daily behavior if it isn't always in your mind. Doesn't mean you have to be thinking about it every second of every day, but you should be able to recite it verbatim when called upon.
Right.
And if you can't, then it's not doing anything for you. And so, yeah, you should remind yourself about it and remind your family, remind your children, remind your team what that is until the point that they roll their eyes and go, oh my gosh, the values again. Yes, I know the values is what they are. So to the point where they're insulted that you're still asking them.
Yeah, I think until you get to that point, you haven't done it enough.
If it isn't something.
If people are still writing them down, you haven't done it enough.
Thanks for making the great decision to listen in to this week's episode highlight. If you want more of what you just heard, see the show notes for the full episode. As always, for the latest decision-making tips, find us on decidedlypodcast.com or on Instagram @decidedlypodcast. And be sure to sign up for our weekly newsletter from the link in the show notes. Don't forget to leave us a 5-star review as well. We read all of your comments, so if you learned some decision-making tips today, let us know. Until next time, this is Decidedly. Insights, advice, and comments provided by Sean Smith, Sanger Smith, and speakers identified as part of the Decidedly podcast should not be considered recommendations. Speakers not identified as members of Decidedly are expressing their opinion, and their statements should not be construed as reflecting the views of the Decidedly team. This podcast is produced solely for informational purposes, not personalized advice.